Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. And today, there is now a new rumor going around that we might only not just get another solo villain film within the DC universe, but also that it would be a Lex Luthor solo film as well. Now, this is just a rumor at this point in time, so nothing's been confirmed yet, but this is a rumor coming from our boys over at Bounding to Comics saying that the DC universe is considering a Lex Luthor solo film after Joker's success. Now, I know that there's a lot of people out there that are already going to want to play down this news as probably not being true because of the fact that Lex Luthor relies so much on Superman and being the villain of Superman to really have any reason to exist. I understand that many people are going to be not wanting to have these types of films going out in the future and that it really worked with Joker, but that's really a rare case of it being able to work really well, and maybe these other types or other attempts on their part to try and make films centered around these characters wouldn't work nearly as well. And I understand that, but I will say this much. I'm kind of excited within the world of the DC universe right now because of the success of Joker. Because in my mind, what it does is it opens up the entire world for Warner Brothers and for DC Comics to be able to come together and create new and original stories based off of their characters from the comics. You know, we are still going to be getting our giant big budget films like Wonder Woman 1984, like Birds of Prey, which again, I have a lot of speculation about and I have a lot of doubts about being good, especially after that first trailer. Dear Lord, that first trailer and that full title is just downright awful. But at the end of the day, I think that I'm much more excited what they're doing in these solo one-off movies than in their actual main universe. Obviously, I'm excited for Wonder Woman 1984. I'm excited for the prospect of them doing a Shazam film. Obviously, Batman is going to be coming in the future, but also even that Batman film with Robert Pattinson is set to essentially be at least somewhat similar to either a one-off or at least a closed trilogy or a closed set of films that might not actually be connected with the overall universe. And so, in my opinion, I think it's a really good time to be a DC film fan because obviously DC has had a lot of struggles in the past with their films. I know there's a lot of Zack Snyder fanboys out there that love to downvote my videos anytime I criticize a dude, but I think most people with common sense can understand that he just was not a good person to run the DC universe. He did not have a good vision. He did not have a good forward-thinking vision. Yeah, the dude is usually pretty good with visual effects and an overall picture for his films, but he really just failed on so many levels. And one could easily blame the studio and studio interference, but I've seen his projects when he's had almost no studio interference, and it's just nothing is really all that impressive. I can't think of one film that he's made that has aged well that I actually would want to go back to and watch. But because they are now moving long past the Zack Snyder era, now they have the ability to experiment. Now they have the idea because they have nothing to lose at this point, right? Those were all gigantic films that either just barely broke even at the box office because it cost so much to make and they didn't ever make it to the $1 billion mark. It wasn't until Aquaman that they finally reached the $1 billion mark because they brought James Wan on, who had been very successful in making action films. So what I'm hoping is that we'll get this really nice dichotomy of films where you'll get the action films on one side that'll be very well made, maybe somewhat similar to the MCU, right? Similar beats, etc., but having different characters, so maybe the stories will be just different enough to be able to differentiate itself from other Marvel films, but also in this new solo or almost different type of universe in a lot of ways, because it's a disconnected universe. That's why they are trying to call themselves the worlds of DC, right? They're trying to call themselves that because they don't believe that all of their films are going to be and have to be interconnected, that there can be this separation between them, as Joker is set to be a one-off film. But at the same time, too, I really do honestly believe that this is going to hopefully open up the door for them to be able to do that with more characters. Because if there's one thing that we can hopefully all come to agreement on, or at least most of us can come to an agreement on, Joker was a damn good film. Most people are loving the Joker. Most people think it is one of the greatest films that have been made in the DC. I would say that it's up there with the Nolan verse, right? With the Nolan Batman films as far as the quality goes. They could easily connect it into other parts of their universe. They could easily start a universe and start a franchise from this film, which I'm glad they're not, or at least there were no original plans to. And if that's going to inspire other one-offs like it, or at least other films that are a little bit more constrained, not going the big budget route and instead focusing on character studies, I'm okay with that. A lot of, there are some comic book fans out there that might not like that all that much, and I can respect them for that. Again, someone that's not a comic book guy myself, I can respect anyone that loves the source material and wants to see the source material on screen being respected. But as a movie lover, again, as someone that loves cinema, as someone that loves to see not just action films, but also character studies, well-written dramas, well-written action dramas, well-written thriller dramas, the whole mix and mash. I think that this opens up for them the possibility to really play with genres, very similar to what Logan was able to do in the Fox universe, right? In the Wolverine universe over there with X-Men. What Joker now has been able to do in the DC universe. It'd be really cool if Marvel was able to finally pick up the pieces a little bit and do something a little bit out of their comfort zone, something a little bit different than what they normally do. You could say that they got somewhat close with it in some of their films, like maybe Ant-Man, but then they didn't really go all the way with Ant-Man. They ended up firing, Edgar Wright. They ended up firing someone that probably could have done something unique and different, and ended up just with a pretty decent comedy, but really nothing all that special about it. Again, I like the first Ant-Man a lot, but it really could have been that much better. It really could have been just something to really, set itself apart. I'm hoping that the MCU eventually goes there, because it's really getting stale at this point, and DC obviously is not helping in that, because DC, for up until recently, was very much about trying to match MCU beat for beat, and then they realized that that's not where they can compete. That's not where they can go toe-to-toe. They can't put a Batman film up against an Iron Man film. They can't put a Avengers film, or rather DC can't put a Justice League film up against Avengers film, because they're going to get destroyed, because Disney and the MCU have been building themselves up for years and years. But where they can break some ground are on films like Joker, and potentially even films like Lex Luthor, or other villains or other superheroes, by trying to say, let's bring it down, let's not put a giant ton of money into it, let's make it low budget, but put a good director behind it, put a lot of marketing behind it, and be able to make money off of it without having to spend the crazy bucks on production with CGI, giant cast, etc. I hope that it really does formulate something for them in the future, where it's a formula that they follow, where they realize that they can play around with these genres, where Batman, hopefully, I know a lot of people are asking for it. At least a lot of the people that that follow me are really wanting Batman to be a detective movie, because dear Lord, that would be so cool to see Batman's character focused on as a detective and not so much on the origin story, which we've already gotten so many times, and without going into just the superhero aspect of the character, but instead a more realistic approach. And again, I think there's pros and cons to both sides of the approach, especially when you deal with the comic book world in general. But I really do hope that the DC universe can continue to be its own unique thing in this way. So let's go ahead and just dive into this rumor for a little bit. This is from our boy John F. Trent. So it says, a new rumor details that Warner Brothers is considering developing a Lex Luthor solo film without Superman after the success of Joker. The rumor came from Mikey Sutton of his Geekosity Facebook group. Sutton writes, Warner Brothers is considering a Lex Luthor film, no Man of Steel. He's pure fiction in this alternate universe. As for the plot of the movie, it would follow the rise of Luthor from an awkward intellectual kid to corrupt wealthy businessman to president of the United States. Sutton adds, slap on an R rating and leave the comic books behind, but perhaps put a twist on the myth, such as making Lois Lane his first lady, but also the reporter who brings him down. And they see that aspect to it I don't like. I don't want to see them do any types of twists like that. But the very beginning is something that I actually would not mind watching. Seeing an origin story take place from Lex Luthor, following his rise from being the young kid into being the corrupt politician, etc. Now, many people will rightly argue that a lot of that corruption has, at least in some ways, tied into that of Lex Luthor. This is me coming from just my Smallville knowledge, which I know Smallville is both good and bad for the comics, but I know that there was this connection, right? There's this back and forth that goes between them, which really influences both Superman and also influences Lex Luthor himself. But at the same time, I think that you could potentially have it be focused more so on his relationship with his family, especially with his father, his relationships, and how they just created the person, because no one just randomly becomes what they are, right? There's a journey that they all go on. There's a journey that every character, whether villain or hero, go on. And I really would like for films and for studios to focus more on those stories. Now, is Lex Luthor the best? I don't think so. I don't think that would be the best person or the best character that you could do a more realistic approach with, just because he does rely so much on Superman. But if you had a really great writer and a really great director behind it, you could probably make that work. But even then, I think that there's other really cool characters that you probably could do something like that with. Like, for example, I might be one of the only ones out there. I would love to see a Clayface origin story. Ever since I saw the Clayface origin from the cartoon back in the 90s, Batman the Animated Series, I love that character. I thought that character was so unique. I love the twist. I love the way that he gets, quote unquote, defeated at the very end of the episode. Everything about it. I think that with everything you have nowadays, not with CGI necessarily, though I'm sure you might need to use some of it, but just with the amount of amazing visual effects that we can do. I look especially to Swamp Thing for this, right? The amount of incredible work that these people behind the scenes are able to do with makeup and with costuming and design. I think you could make a really awesome low-budget version of Clayface, because guess what? You could also have most of the film take place with the actor himself going through this process of changing his face and changing everything about him, and then eventually, of course, being to the point where he gets just doused with the chemical that makes him become Clayface. Again, you could have that be, basically, you could have that be the climax of the film where all of a sudden he becomes Clayface, and that's only at the very end of the film that you get that character come out to fruition. And you could do so much with it beforehand and leading up to it. And again, you could obviously be inspired by the comics, but you could also do somewhat of your own thing if you want to create a new origin story. To me, I think that the DC Universe has the most to be excited for, because they are the ones that are most willing to play with the formula. You know, Disney, Marvel, they're not really willing to stray from their formula. They've made billions of dollars. They're not going to stop making the films that they're making, even though I assume that very quickly audiences are going to start to say, okay, I'm done with this. I don't want to watch this anymore. But DC is in a great position here. What are your thoughts on this, though? Do you think that there would be a good calling for a Lex Luthor solo film, or any other villain or even hero solo film that's more of a grounded, more, I guess, gritty, more real-world take on these characters? I really do honestly think that there is something to consider here, that there is a path, that there is a market out there for films like that. Joker is, I think, a great example of that. Obviously, yeah, people are going to see Joker because it has the Joker's name attached to it. But the fact that Joker is able to exist in a film and is able to exist in its own, singular one-off universe without having to rely on characters like Batman and all the other people, in the cartoon, of course, you would also add in there, many of the surrounding characters around him as well. But I really do think DC has something here, and I would love to hear your thoughts about this in the comment section below. Please let me know if you think this would make a good movie or any other of these things. Do you think that DC will likely go in this direction, or do you think DC will try and, kind of find this balance? That's kind of where I am. I think they're going to have the big budget action stuff, but then also they'll probably try out, because they can. There's nothing to lose, right? They'll try out some of these lower budget films dealing with these one-off stories or these small universe stories, and be able to really just play around. Like, I think that's the reason why I'm most excited, because there's just so much potential there for so many different genres, for so many different filmmakers to come in and make really good films, where on MCU side, exactly it is what you're getting. So DC, I think, is in a better position here. But just let me know what you thought about all this stuff in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash the like button, give me a subscribe. It helps me out a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless.